Hello, second grade Smarties, and welcome to Wit and Wisdom, Module 2, Lesson 21. So, yesterday we introduced our new story, the story of Johnny Appleseed by Aliki. And yesterday we talked about what we noticed and what we wondered in that story. Today, our pizza bite question, our content framing question, is what's happening in the story of Johnny Appleseed? So we are going to be looking at a graphic of the changes that happened during the Western expansion. So I am going to click this YouTube link and I want you to watch what happens as the years progress as America becomes more of a nation. So as you can see, colors are changing. That means that land is being claimed by other people. So here we have Oregon, we have Washington, Oregon, Kansas, Nebraska territory. So notice that individual states are starting to come about. All right. So that is to show the shift and change in the ownership of land. So that graphic is a really cool way of seeing how land has been claimed by people over time. So, what you're wondering, Miss Mason, why are you showing me a map when we're talking about Johnny Appleseed? Well, I showed you that map because John Chapman, or Johnny Appleseed, lived on the frontier in Massachusetts. If you look on this map right here, this red kind of rectangle shape is Massachusetts. So John Chapman lived in Massachusetts where the country had been settled. But everyday pioneers were leaving to travel west. So when people came over from England to settle in the United States, before it was called the United States, Massachusetts was one of the places that the pilgrims settled. They settled in Massachusetts. But remember, over time, people were looking to move out west, where people did not have ownership of the land, but they soon found out that Indians lived on that land. So, one word in this sentence, frontier, it's kind of a vocabulary word. It's a word that we haven't heard before yet when talking about the American West. So the frontier is the far edge of settled land. So this is the far edge of a settled land. So John Chapman grew up in a very settled area. People owned this land. John Chapman wanted to go out west to see those open, unclaimed lands. So we are wanting to figure out what happened to the American frontier. What happened over time? People lived in the frontier on the East Coast. What happened over time? What did people start to do to claim land? They started to move out west, and we've talked about people going through the Oregon Trail. All right, so as we are listening to this story for a second time, I want you to think about that map. Think about how John Chapman went from the frontier in Massachusetts and traveled all the way west across the United States on the Oregon Trail. All right, so as we are reading this, I want you to think about who our characters are, what our setting is, and three important events that happen in the story. Here we go. So get your bodies ready. All right. Many years ago, when America was a new country, there lived a brave and gentle man named John Chapman. John loved the out of doors. He would walk for miles in the woods, among the trees and the flowers, happy and alone with his thoughts. So we're going to pause. Right now, I want you to tell me who is the main character of the story in the Ed Puzzle. Go ahead and tell me. So John Chapman is our main character. When does this story take place? think back to the first sentence. Many years ago, when America was a new country, there lived a brave and gentle man named John Chapman. What does the story tell us when and where this story took place? Or when did this story take place? What time did this take place? Tell me in the puzzle. It says many years ago, so a long time ago is when this story took place. One day, after a long walk, John sat under a tree to rest. He felt the warm sun on his back and the fresh grass tickling his toes. John took an apple from his sack and ate it. And when he had finished, he looked in his hand of what was left, just a few brown seeds. And John thought, if one gathered seeds and planted them, our land would soon be filled with apple trees. John Chapman lived on the frontier in Massachusetts, where the country had been settled, but every day pioneers were leaving to travel west, where there were no homes or villages and where the only roads were Indian trails. So far in the story, what is the setting of the story? Where does the story take place? Tell me in the puzzle. It takes place in the frontier in Massachusetts. So far we know our character and our setting. What does John Chapman dream of doing? What does he dream of doing? Let's go back. And John thought, if one gathered and planted them, our land would soon be filled with apple trees. So what does John Chapman dream to do? Tell me in the puzzle. He dreams of leaving Massachusetts and planting apple trees. Let's see what else he does on his journey. In their covered wagons, the pioneers made the long and dangerous journey through the wilderness. They wanted to build new lives for themselves in a new part of the country. John Chapman went too, but he did not travel in a covered wagon. He walked in his bare feet. He carried no weapons, as men did in those days, to protect themselves from wild animals and danger. He carried only a large sack on his back filled with apple seeds and his cooking pan on his head. So, what event happens on this page? What is the first important event that happens? What does John Chapman do on this page? Tell me in the puzzle. We learn that John Chapman leaves with the pioneers by walking with a large sack on his back, his cooking pan, and in bare feet to go out west. How is he different from the other pioneers? How is John Chapman different from the other pioneers? He isn't traveling in a wagon. He's traveling by foot. So I want you to think, do you think that's going to make his journey easier or harder? As he walked, John planted seeds. He gave a small bagful to everyone he saw. Soon, everyone who knew him called him Johnny Appleseed. Sometimes Johnny stopped for many weeks helping the pioneers. They cleared the land, they built homes, they planted rows and rows of apple trees. When they were finished, Johnny walked on to help others, but he always came back to see his friends. Everyone loved Johnny Appleseed, especially the children. When Johnny rested from his planting, the children sat around him, listening to all his adventures. So in these 2 pages, what is an important event that happens? What is something that Johnny Appleseed is doing on his journey? Tell me in the puzzle. So we learn that he plants seeds. He helps the pioneers by clearing land and building homes and planting apple trees. We also learn that he tells story to children. So in this section of the story, who has Johnny met? He's met the pioneers. Let's see who else he meets. Johnny Appleseed walked alone. He slept out of doors in the woods or by the river. He met wolves and foxes, birds and deer. They were all his friends. One day, as Johnny was eating lunch, he heard a noise, and 3 little bear cubs ran from behind a tree. When the mother bear came and saw them playing together, she sat and watched. She knew Johnny Appleseed would not harm her young. Johnny met many Indians on the way. He was kind to them and gave them seeds and herbs, which they used as medicine. Although the Indians were not friendly to any white men who chased them from their homes, Johnny was their friend. Johnny did not like people to fight. He tried to make peace between the settlers and the Indians, for he believed that all men should live together as brothers. So, in this section of the book, what is an important event that happens in Johnny's journey? What is something that is very important in this part of the story? The first important event is that we learn that he travels on foot with a bag on his back. Then he follows the pioneers and helps them build their homes in clear lands and plant apple trees. In this section of the book, who has Johnny met? Tell me in the Ed puzzle. In this section of the story, Johnny Appleseed has met Indians. And when he's met the Indians and their settlers, what does Johnny Appleseed try to do? What does he try to do between the Indians and the settlers? He tries to make peace. He tries to be peaceful with both groups. On and on Johnny walked, planting as he went. When he needed more seeds, he collected sackfuls from the cider mills. Everyone saved his apple seeds for Johnny. Many years passed. Johnny Appleseed walked on. He visited his friends and saw with pleasure the many apple trees which covered the land, and he was happy. But then, one year, there was a long, cold winter. When spring should have come, snow was still on the ground, and frost was on the trees. Johnny could not sleep or eat. He was afraid his trees would die. As he was walking among the trees one day, Johnny Appleseed fell to the ground. He was very ill. After some hours, an Indian mother and her son passed and saw Johnny lying in the cold. Quickly, the boy ran for help. Johnny was carried to the village not far away. So, what has happened at this point in the story? What has happened to Johnny? Tell me in the Ed puzzle. It's still winter, and Johnny is worried about his apple trees not growing, and he falls and becomes very ill. So, as this story progresses, we need to think about the big events that happen and how they all contribute or help us understand the story of Johnny Appleseed. For many days, he lay ill with fever. The Indians gave him medicine and nursed him. And one day, Johnny Appleseed opened his eyes. He smiled at his Indian friends. He knew they had saved his life. He saw that the sun was warm and the frost had left the trees. Spring had come at last, and Johnny was well again. But he never forgot his friends and went to see them often. Johnny Appleseed, the gentle pioneer, lived for many years, planting apple trees wherever he went. We can still see them today. They are large and old and heavy with apples. They are the gift Johnny Appleseed gave to his country and to you and to me. All right. So after listening to that story a second time, I want you to think about the setting of the story. How was the setting different from the beginning to the end? What was different about the setting in the beginning of John Chapman's story to the end of his story? Tell me in the Ed puzzle. So at the beginning of the story, John Chapman is in Massachusetts, right? And he's eating apples, and he thinks about traveling west with the pioneers, those settlers, and planting apple trees along the way. So in the beginning, it takes place in that settled land in Massachusetts. But throughout the story, as he's going west and traveling with the pioneers and the Indians, he gets further west in that unsettled land, planting apple trees. All right, so this is a story chart that we can look at to help us organize our thoughts and organize our story of Johnny Appleseed when we retell the story. So when we are learning about retelling a story, that means retelling it with our words, vocal words, or with written words. We want to make sure that we talk about our characters, our settings, Normally we talk about the problem and resolution, but this time when we are talking about Johnny Appleseed's story, we want to think about three major events that happen in this story. Okay, so throughout listening to that story for a second time, I asked you to think, what is happening in the story right now? What important event is happening right now? So let's look at our story chart to see what our character, our setting, and our important events are. All right, so our setting was many years ago when America was a new country. So that was when the story happened. Where it started was in Massachusetts. Our main character was Johnny Appleseed, but at the beginning, he's introduced as John Chapman. The beginning event, so this is what happens in the beginning. It started in Massachusetts with Johnny Appleseed. First, John lived in Massachusetts and dreamed of filling the country with apple trees. Then he lived in the woods and became friends with many animals. Along the way, he met Indians and became their friend. He tried to make peace between Indians and settlers. He met Indians and became their friends too. In the end, he got sick one winter, and his Indian friends found him and helped him get well. So, as I retold the story, I didn't talk about specific things. I didn't talk about how he made children laugh. I didn't talk about the mama bear and the 3 baby cubs. I didn't talk about the deer and the wolves and the birds that he met, right? I talked about key important details that happened throughout the story. I talked about how he made friends with animals, but I didn't talk about specific animals, right? I just wanted you to know that that was an important event in his story. He met and became friends with animals. But I did use topic specific words when I was talking about how he tried to make peace between Indians and settlers, not just people. He tried to make peace between Indians and settlers. So, if you look, I'm moving. If you look over here to the right, I said when we retell a story, we have to make sure to talk about the characters, the setting, and important events. So when we are retelling a story, we can use sentence starters to help us organize our thoughts. The story of Johnny Appleseed started in, where did it start? In Massachusetts with our main character, Johnny Appleseed. First, John lived in Massachusetts and dreamed of filling the country with apple trees. Then he lived in the woods and became friends with many animals. Along the way, he became friends with settlers and Indians and tried to make peace between the Indians and settlers. In the end, he got sick one winter, but his Indian friends helped him get better and he kept traveling along. So notice when I retold that story, I only talked about the very, very important events that relate to Johnny Appleseed's journey. We don't want to get super specific because we want to retell the story in as short and as detailed of a way as possible. All right, we're gonna move. Maybe. There we go. All right. So I know what you're thinking. Oh, Miss Mason, every time we read a new book, you tell us we're going to have to write about it. And you're right. You are going to be writing about it, but you're going to be doing something different. You guys are going to be creating your own book of your retelling of Johnny Appleseed. Now, we're not doing that today, but we are going to be using digital tools. So I want you to think, if you are one of my second grade smarties, you use digital tools every day. What is an online tool that you use on your computer every day? What is something that you use on your computer every day? Tell me in the ed puzzle. So something that we use every day as a tool in our online learning, we use Google Classroom. We can use YouTube as a digital tool. We can use an online dictionary. We can use Seesaw. We can use Kids A to Z. We can use Epic Books. We have so many resources. So what we are going to use this week, and we are going to be exploring that on our own in a different setting, we are going to be creating a book. Now, you guys are going to have plenty of practice of creating this book, and I will provide tutorials for that on my YouTube channel as well. But we're going to be creating a book of using those sentence starters to retell the story of Johnny Appleseed as a book. Whew, so cool. So keep tuned in to see how we are going to learn how to make a online book. All right, and let's finish with a deep dive, my second grade Smarties. So yesterday we talked about past tense verbs, and we know that verbs that happened in the past almost most of the time, past tense verbs end in that ed suffix. But today we're going to be talking about irregular past tense verbs. So verbs are action words in a sentence. It's something we can do, right? So verbs can have suffixes that determine when an action happened. But sometimes past tense verbs can have a different spelling than that base verb. So let's look at some examples. So if I sit, I am sitting right now. She sits in the chair. But yesterday, she sat in the chair. Ooh, so look at those spellings. Sit. The past tense isn't sitted, it's sat. I feel really tired today. Feel is that base word. She feels tired today. Feel is the present tense. Woo! But if I feel in the past, I felt really tired. So look at that spelling. It is very different from the base word feel. Okay, look. I look out the window for snow. I look out the window for snow. I looked out the window for snow yesterday. Looked. What is it ending in? It's ending in that ed. I think about my second grade Smarties all the time. Think is a present tense, but look at the past tense. I thought about my second grade Smarties all the time over Christmas break. Thought is the past for think. Look at that spelling, Smarties. It's completely different. Okay, gather, gathered. It ends in ed. Plant, planted. Fill, filled. Walk, walked. Remember that ed can sound like id, d, or t. I give you opportunities to learn. I gave you new opportunities to learn at the beginning of the school year. So give and gave. It's not gived, gave. No, I know you are second grade Smarties, but I knew all along you were the smartest Smarties of the land. So no is present tense. Knew is past for no. Call, called, ed. Stop, stopped. That ed sounds like a t. Clear, cleared. Build, I love to build new models, but I built lots of models in the past. So the past for build is built. She will come to class tomorrow. She came to class yesterday. So the present for come is come, but the past is came. All right, help. The past for that is helped. It ends in that ed. I see some ice cream in the refrigerator. I saw the ice cream in the refrigerator. So the past for see is saw. And tickling, the past is tickled. So what is different about some of the past tense verbs like thought and sat? What is different about some of these verbs? What do they not end in? Tell me in the puzzle. They don't end in that suffix ed. So most past tense verbs end in ed, but some have irregular spelling. So that means they're spelled in a different way. All right, second grade Smarties, that is it for our lesson. As you can see, we will be doing lesson 22 tomorrow. As always, keep that growth mindset. Good learners do hard things, and I will see you tomorrow for another lesson. Happy learning, Smarties.